good at being young. I think that being young is about being sexy and fun. Not necessarily the sort of sexy and fun you see in ads for Lipton iced tea and that kind of thing. But I don't know, whenever I look at young people, no matter what their interests are, I always think they have an element of those things about them. And I just don't. I never have. When I was 18, I was in the smokers section of Woodland Bar, and I was talking to a boy named Andrew who offered me a cigarette, which I took. But in the middle of smoking it, he leaned in and kissed me. And when we pulled apart, I was so befuddled by that happening. And I think in an effort to be young, sexy and fun, I went to take like a cool drag of the cigarette. Only I guess I wasn't holding it tight enough in my fingers, because when I breathed in, I just sort of sucked the whole thing into my mouth, into the back of my throat, choked on it and then spat it out. Andrew looked at the cigarette on the ground and then at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I was finished." For a long time, I really liked making out with people at parties, but I just had zero interest in having sex. And it didn't bother me that much not to be having sex, but my complete lack of interest did confuse me a bit. I have dinner with my family once a week, and from the ages of about 16 to 20, every week without fail, I would ask my family to explain to me what was interesting about sex, like what was I missing. And my parents would get sort of mad at me about it. Like once I said that sex seemed kind of boring, and my mum said it was like I had gone to Paris and told a French person that escargot seemed gross without ever having tried it myself. They weren't like trying to pressure me into having sex at all. I think they were just baffled by how much I was overthinking it. They were sort of like, just do it or don't do it, but please stop asking us to talk about sex because it's weird. My brother and his girlfriend were a little more helpful. When I said that vaginas seemed nice but confusing, they emailed me a bunch of diagrams to look at. And when I said that penises were too aggressive looking, they set up a website called accessiblepenises.com. Where they just reblogged a lot of photos of like soft, friendly looking penises dipped in glitter and penises shot with a soft focus lens. In order to gently acclimatize me to the world of male genitals. I guess it worked because when I was 21, I did eventually have sex. I had sex with a boy with a long, thin penis, fairly friendly looking it seemed. And then I went on to have sex with other people, and it wasn't boring, and I did like it. Vaginas still confused me, more like in a fun puzzle kind of way, and penises didn't seem nearly as aggressive. I thought I was well on my way to becoming young, sexy and fun, but then last year in August, I was at my grandfather's funeral and my breast would not stop itching. It's a very unsexy sentence, if ever there was one. When I got home, I made an appointment to see a doctor. About a month or two after I had lost my virginity, I found a lump in my breast, and I had an ultrasound and they told me it was benign and I shouldn't worry about it. Only now that it had gotten bigger and started itching, I knew it needed to be checked again. Sure enough, I had a biopsy and I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 22. I got that diagnosis on a Tuesday morning, and by Thursday night I was in the shower crying, trying unsuccessfully to press my right breast against my mouth in order to kiss it goodbye before the mastectomy the next morning. Only my breast wasn't big enough to reach my mouth, unfortunately. My plastic surgeon actually said to me, he was like, "You're kind of lucky that the cancer is in the right breast, because the left breast is the more attractive, perkier breast." He said that the right breast had started to droop a bit, and I thought, how dare you? Way to kick a breast when it's down. The chances of getting breast cancer at 22 are like 1 in every 250,000 breast cancer cases. Most women who get it are in their 50s at least. It's a diagnosis that has devastated my life in a way that I'm just now coming to realize no one will ever be able to fully understand. I think it was months before even I realized just how much of my life it had infected. For the first half of treatment, I kept thinking that if I just steeled myself enough and I got through it, eventually everything would go back to the way it was. Only eventually I realized I was never going to get my pre-cancer life back. The universe was never going to say, "Hey, you've been a really good sport about everything, now have a bunch of prizes." This realization was the worst pain I've ever felt. It felt something like homesickness. Like how I imagine it feels when you go on a really shitty holiday and you're just looking forward to coming home. Only when you get home, you find that your house has burnt down and you have nowhere to go. I kept trying to find a reason for it to have happened. Like, I wasn't a smoker, I didn't know how, clearly. I was young, I did drink, but so do a lot of people. I was so desperate to find a reason for it to have happened that I remember one night, a few weeks into treatment, I was sitting on my bed and I was looking at Wikipedia articles, and there was this page about this monkey in Madagascar called the eye monkey. It's this weird looking thing with 4 normal fingers and then 1 long narrow finger that it uses to get ants out of trees. There's some legend that says if the eye points at you with this long narrow finger, then you've been marked for death. So people often kill these things when they wander into a village because no one wants to be pointed at by one of them. Here's what ran through my head. I first found a lump a month after I lost my virginity to a boy with a long, thin penis. The eye monkey has this similar looking long, thin finger. Did that boy point at me with his weird monkey finger penis and kiss me and mark me for death? But I really thought that maybe I had been cursed. And in some ways I still think I might have been cursed. In 2014, I was really stressed about finishing my honours year. I had feelings for someone for the first time which didn't work out. My best friend moved to London, my grandfather died, and then I got cancer, which made it really difficult to process or get closure on any of those other things, even though I hadn't stopped hurting from them. There was no hope left in my life. Like, I've been through sad times before, but always there was a little bit of hope that things would turn around, and I didn't have that anymore. I was constantly terrified, constantly waiting for the next thing to go wrong, and constantly aware that the next big thing to go wrong in my life might have been dying. And I felt like I was going through it all alone. Like, people were sympathetic, but I guess most people thought I needed space, or they were young and insecure and didn't want to embarrass themselves or embarrass me by doing or saying the wrong thing, and so they just left me alone. And for 8 months of treatment, I spent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, wandering around my house, full of chemicals, going crazy, comparing boys' penises to cursed monkey fingers. A few weeks ago, I visited my grandma in New South Wales. My grandfather died last year after being sick for a long time with leukemia. My grandparents live in a small coastal town, and they go to church often, and they're well known and well loved by everyone. They had a very romantic life together, the proper kind of life that wasn't at all perfect throughout, but still sort of ended up being perfect in the end. We were at the Bowls Club for dinner, and this man walked past our table, and my grandma said that man used to lean over to her at church every week, and he would say, "Send my regards to Mick." How hard would it have been, she said. How hard would it have been for him to just come over to the house and spend 15 minutes with your grandfather? But people don't. And she wasn't angry at all as she said this. She said, "Me and Keith have a routine." Keith is her neighbour. About a week before my grandfather died, Keith's wife died also from a heart attack. She said that every morning she goes down to her kitchen and she opens up her blinds, and then she looks up across the street and Keith opens his. Every morning they do this. That's their routine. I read a newspaper column once. It was a woman talking about supporting someone through grief. She said that sometimes you don't have to say anything or do anything. It's enough just to sit with someone, to let them know that you're willing to be with them amongst the destruction of their life. I was at a party in the middle of chemo, and I had been feeling like I didn't belong, like no one wanted me around, like I didn't fit in anymore because all of my friends were young and I could no longer consider myself young like they were. A friend came up to me, and he was a friend I had known for a while but wasn't particularly close to, and he told me about his dad who had been diagnosed with cancer around the same age, 22 or 23, and how he understood that this had happened to me at the worst possible time it could happen. He said that young people were inherently selfish. Necessarily so. Being young is a time for figuring out who you are, so obviously you focus on yourself. That just makes sense. He understood that, but he also understood that it wouldn't help me, that people would leave me behind. They wouldn't mean to, but they would. We were at a party, and someone I didn't even know that well had stepped out of his life and into my rubble and understood completely how I felt. And my loneliness no longer felt selfish or demanding. I knew that people cared about me, but he knew that it was impossible for young people to care about you as much as you feel like you need to be cared about after a cancer diagnosis. Sometimes I feel really angry about what happened to me, and I feel angry even though there's no one at fault, at people whose lives were unaffected while mine fell apart. Sometimes I worry that this anger has swallowed up every good part of me that there is. Sometimes I worry that this anger is all I am now. But then I think of the people who did step out of their lives and into mine. I think of small moments and small gestures and how important they are, how little things can mean something big. And I no longer feel the need to be understood by everybody or even to understand everybody. I think there will be times in my life, because of everything that's happened, that I'll be able to give someone else the little moments of understanding that meant so much to me. When I have those thoughts, the anger dissipates. I may never feel young, sexy, and fun. It might literally not be in my DNA to be those things. But I think I have a good chance of being young and kind, and if I'm honest about it, that's probably what I would have always preferred to have been. Thank you.